Hi everyone, welcome back. As you can see, I'm squinting and it's still sunny. I've been away from the plot for 4 weeks and I've been back for 3 days. Just about got on top of the weeding. I've still got quite a bit of clearing to do, and a lot of the harvests have come and gone. The sweet corn's in the freezer. We've had a few failures as well with things going to seed, but we really can't complain. As you can see, the tomatoes have really benefited from the sun. So I'll give you a quick tour of the plot in this update, I think, and we'll look at some of the failures and some of the successes. Okay, catch you later. Hi again. We're looking over the no-dig plot now, and I just wanted to show you the squash and how they've got on this year. They've taken quite a bit of watering. My daughter's been watering while I've been away on holiday, but they've done really well. And this is the second year that we've had squash on this plot, and we've got a no-dig border that's about 7 to 8 feet in width and about 45 feet long. Last year I had hundreds of squash. This year I decided to put fewer plants in, and with a bit of luck we'll have about 50 or 60 fruits. The two main varieties here are Shiki curry. They're up at the top beneath the sunflowers, and then just below me, have to excuse my shadow, we've got some butternut squash. So I'll show you the fruits and try and keep my shadow out of the way, and then you'll see just how they're getting on. The Shiki curry are doing just fine, as you can see. Probably a little bit ahead of schedule. They're colouring up really nicely. They're nice and orange and red, and I've had a quick tot up, and I think there might be about a dozen from these 3 plants, and they're a nice size as well. They're not too big and not too small, quite consistent really in their habit. There's a little bit of yellowing on the foliage, but it's doing okay, I think. Behind me you can see that we've got quite a lot of butternut squash, and they're not massive this year. I think I've got one plant where they're a little bit larger, but for the most part they're probably about a pound and a half in weight, but that's a nice size anyway, and they're very, very fleshy, the butternut squash. Skin's quite tender, not too difficult to cut through. We've also got quite a few courgettes on this part of the border. I've taken loads of giant ones off. They weren't taken off in my absence, but they've just been composted. It's sad, but that's just how it is. But they've started fruiting again, as you can see. There are a couple there, and some more here that are ready to take, and they're doing remarkably well. But they have had a lot of water. And then just at the side of the greenhouse on the no-dig plot, we've got 3 Crown Prince plants, and they've done exceptionally well. When I left 3 weeks ago, we just had 3 tiny little plants. Each plant had covered probably a square metre, if that. But now, this whole area, which is about 14 feet by 9 feet, is completely covered. They've been growing into the greenhouse. As you can see, they're making a break for it over the fence at the back there, into the paddock beyond the fence. And 3 plants here, and I think I've got about 3 squash per plant, and they're a decent sort of size as well. There's another one at the side there, so and one just here to the left of me. So there may be a few extra that I've not seen, but 9 or 10 I would think. And so we'll have 3 different varieties: Crown Prince, Shiki curry and butternut squash. So that's the squash for this year. As I say, they've really flourished in the nice weather. Looking at the 3rd plot now, and the no-dig flower bed is still doing really well. We've not had much in the way of rain, so things have not been spoiled. But the dahlias have been joined by the gladioli, and all of the dwarf sunflowers are out now, and they do look really nice. Most of the smaller plants, border plants if you will, along the side of the path, they're okay as well, the marigolds and a few other small foxglove type plants. But it's still looking really, really colourful. So the colour palette on the dahlias is a little bit more limited this year, as I mentioned in the last update, but for the most part they do look lovely, look really nice. A little bit of deadheading to do today, but we're still enjoying these. If I turn to the right though, one of the things that's not been as good this year, and I think other people have suffered as well, Nigel Muddy Boots mentioned in a response to a comment that I made, he pointed out as well that he'd lost some of his brassicas, and this bed had some greyhound, some other smaller small-headed cabbage and broccoli. The broccoli were fantastic, you saw those in earlier updates, but all of the brassicas that were in here have gone to seed. I've had my daughter and my cousin watering while I've been away, but they've clearly not managed to get round to this and water it perhaps as much as it needed. But it's understandable really, given the heat that we've had. It's also full of weeds as well. So we've got a bed here with probably about 20-25 cabbage plants, and they've all gone to seed. They've all blown, as you can see. So this has got to be cleared, and I'll do that either today or tomorrow. Turnips and swede, same fate there as well. They were covered up and then we took off the covers, but they've been hammered by the heat, and cabbage whites and whitefly as well. So it's a mixed bag really on the third plot. We do have some more swede and turnips down in the blue tunnels down there, so hopefully we'll still get a decent harvest later in the autumn, early winter. Potatoes have done alright. We've not had much in the way of rain, so we've not been fallen prey to blight. And I think I've got 6 rows of main crop here, Picasso and King Edward at the top, and then a couple rows of Charlotte at the bottom. The Charlotte can stay in a while longer, but over this coming weekend the main crop potatoes are going to come up as well. Sweet corn has been fantastic. It's all in the freezer now. There might be 3 or 4 cobs, maybe half a dozen cobs at most, still on there. So I might leave this another week or so before I clear it. But all in all, things have been very productive, notwithstanding the drought that we've had. Hi again, Friday morning. Been back home now for 4 days and I'm just about sorted with the weeding. I just thought I'd show you the kohlrabi and then give you a quick tour of the greenhouses before I call a close to this update. These went in quite late. They're in one of the larger no-dig beds on the no-dig allotment, and they were a little bit leggy to be honest, and you can see that some of them were too leggy really to go in, and I couldn't plant them deeply enough, so they're actually standing out of the ground, some of them, as you can see just there. But that's not stopped them growing, and I've about 25 I would say of the purple ones. It's a nice one just there, about tennis ball sized. And down at the bottom here I've got about a dozen of the green variety. I've taken 4 already and they're okay, they're not woody or anything, so the fact that they're standing out of the soil's not affected the growth or the quality of the kohlrabi flesh. So these are quite a, what's the word for it, quite a tender brassica really. When I've grown them in the past and I've put them out too early when it's been cold, they've really not liked it and they've suffered quite a bit of wind burn. So I tend to plant them later, but as I say, this year they were a little bit too late, but we got them in anyway. I do have a batch on the new plot, but I'm not convinced that they'll grow to maturity because it's been so hot. and I don't think they've been watered very much. Right, so that's the kohlrabi. We'll take a look at the greenhouses. This is the greenhouse on the no-dig plot, and it looks quite good now. It didn't look this well when I arrived because I made the mistake of, we'll go inside, it's a little bit windy. I made the mistake of topping up the pots before I went away, and whilst that's a good idea, I should have moistened the compost, but I didn't, and as a result the birds have got in and they've been kicking it around all over the place. So I had a big sweep up job when I arrived. I've pruned all the tomato plants as well. My daughter, my dad and my cousin have taken tons off in our absence, and as you saw earlier in this update, I've taken some off as well. That was actually the second harvest of the beefsteak. These are all beefsteak, I think, with the exception of this one at the back. And this is a bonus plant because if you look down at the back here on the floor, you can see that this is not actually grown in a pot. It's a seed that fell out of a squash tomato into the greenhouse onto the floor there at the edge where there's a bit of soil, and it's grown. And the tomato plant that was in this pot, I actually cut the tip out when I thought I was side shooting when it was quite small, so it only grew one truss. So that's finished. I've taken it out and I've grown what appears to be a cherry. I'm not certain what variety of cherry it is. It'll be a sungold or maybe a black cherry. And from a seed that's grown on its own, and I didn't really spot it until about the end of June, and it's been tied in, and I think we've got about 5 or 6 trusses on it, so fingers crossed we'll get some tomatoes off that one. Show you another mistake that I made. This is a classic newbie error, which I shouldn't have made really. We've got quite a heavy truss of tomatoes here. I've taken a few off it already, but you can see that the stem of the plant was tied to the cane but below the truss, and you should never do that, because as the truss develops its tomatoes and it gets heavy, it creates a weak point where the twine nips into the stem below it. So what you should always do is what I've done there, and tie in above the truss, so that puts the tension above the truss rather than below it. So we've thinned this one out. As I say, there's still quite a few tomatoes that have yet to mature, but I've taken loads off. But I have also thrown lots away. I would say from this greenhouse I must have thrown away 50 or 60 tomatoes as a result of blossom end rot. I've done my best to water during the earlier part of the summer and the midsummer, and I've had people watering while I've been away, but without a drip system and constant moisture, you run the risk of getting blossom end rot at fruit if it's too hot and there's not enough water transporting calcium up through the plant. So it's just how it is sometimes. But I've got 13 plants in here, and when you have 13 plants and you've got good light, even if you lose a third of the crop, you've still got plenty to go at. And these are the black Japanese trefoil, and these are really, really lovely, these tomatoes. They're so sweet. I've read before that they're a preferred tomato amongst many European chefs, and they are lovely. They're so sweet, and as you can see, there are lots of trusses, probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 trusses. They'll all ripen. I've got one on this side as well, and I think the one on the right here had 2 stems, and it's still produced lots of tomatoes. So that's the beefsteak greenhouse. We'll take a quick look at the middle and the bottom greenhouse. In the middle greenhouse now, and as you can see on this plant, I think this might be a country taste. We've got probably a dozen or so Actually, looking at it, it's probably not country taste. It might be a mortgage lifter, looking at the pinkiness of that tomato. But there's about a dozen or so on that plant. We've got a pink ox heart here, probably about 10 left on there. They're all going to be a decent size though. A green zebra, which is quite nice, and another green zebra here. These were just two harbinger, two standard tomato plants, and managed to get some lettuce leaf sown before I went away, so that when I came back we'd have some to eat. But I do need to sow some more. I've been back 3 or 4 days and I've just been cleaning, tidying, weeding. I've got to clear several beds still, but I've not done any sowing yet, and I need to get around to that. Take a quick look at the third greenhouse. We're in the third greenhouse now. This is at the foot of the, I'll just turn you around, just at the foot of the no-dig flower bed. It's always quite nice to sit in here if it's raining and just look at the flowers. Nice and protected. But this year I've got the cherries in this greenhouse, and we've got 4 varieties I think. We've got the Sun Gold, we've got a Sun Baby, which is a yellow one, with a Zakura, which is a red one, and then a black cherry. And the tomatoes are repeated, sort of mirrored if you will, on the other side. We've got 14 plants in here. Oh, I've also got a green grape down at the bottom here, which is a nice tomato. It's quite, people think that it's difficult to spot when it's ripe, but it's not, because if you can see just there, they do turn a yellowy green, but they're very, very nice. But this particular plant I found is best neglected, you know, kept on its toes, not given too much water, not too much feed, and the tomatoes always taste much sweeter. So they're doing okay. As you can see, the bottom 3 trusses have been stripped, and we've stripped the foliage as well. And with a couple of the Sun Gold, because as we all know they do tend to like to grow on, I've grown them to about 10 or 11 trusses, and I've grown them across this central rod. It's a lateral rod, a tensioner for the roof, in case you get snow in the winter, so it stops the roof from splaying sideways, so it holds it together. But it's actually quite good just to run a long tomato vine across. So we've got 2 Sun Gold growing from either side, and they're about to meet in the middle. I did grow the beefsteaks in here last year, but because of the grapevine, I chose to move them up to the brighter greenhouse at the top. The cherries seem to do well, notwithstanding the shade, but the beefsteaks, because the longer season varieties, later in the season they tended to rot off a little bit, with it being a little bit darker and a bit danker. So that's the large greenhouse. We've got one other greenhouse that's just got the cucumbers in, and they're nearly finished, so I won't show you those. So we'll just finish with a look at the flowers. I think we might be in for a little bit of rain. So thank you very much for calling by, and I hope you enjoyed looking around the plot. Sorry if it was a little bit too long, but it's 4 weeks since I did the last update, and we'll be a little bit more focused in future updates. Okay, thank you very much for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I hope to see you again soon. All the best.